Thank you everyone for coming. Hopefully this is a talk you're here for. So just a few things from the title. The three things I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about Stratos, which is an open source project that my team is responsible for. It's all to do with managing and monitoring multi-cloud PaaS. We're part of the Cloud Application Platform group within SUSE. So I'm going to start there. I don't know how much you know about the Cloud Application Platform, but it's all about applications. So it's all aimed at helping enterprises kind of accelerate innovation by getting their applications to market quicker. It's all about developers being able to build apps in minutes rather than weeks. And it lets developers focus on their code rather than how that code is deployed and scaled. Now, at the heart of Cloud Application Platform is Cloud Foundry. I won't say too much about this. There's a report you can go check out if you want to learn a bit more. Key thing is this is the sort of prevailing open source Cloud Application Platform, or PaaS, Platform as a Service. It's used by a ton of companies. And again, it's really aimed at making it easier and faster for developers to build applications. So then from my point of view, given that Cloud Foundry is a core part of the Cloud Application Platform, we were looking at what management tools are there for Cloud Foundry. Are they sufficient? Are there more that we can provide? It turns out the main tool that was available for Cloud Foundry was the CLI, as you might expect, which is great. It's really the only standard open source tool available. It's great for automation and scripting. It's great that it tracks the feature set being put into Cloud Foundry, but it requires client installation. It's not really designed for browsing, so you can't kind of easily jam around your Cloud Foundry, see what's going on. You can't get insights into your Cloud Foundry like I'm over quota. You can't get aggregated views across Cloud Foundries. And you can't really easily switch between things like orgs and spaces within Cloud Foundry. So I'll show some of this later, and maybe you'll get a feel for this. So I should say, I'm going to talk for maybe 15 minutes, just to give you some context. Then I'm going to flip, and most of the presentation will be a demo where I actually show you some of the features that we've built. So given this, we said, well, there's no standard web-based management application, so why don't we create one? And that's what Stratos is. So Stratos provides an easy-to-use web-based application that makes developers and administrators. It gives them the ability to manage their applications across multiple Cloud Foundry deployments. Right, it was created by SUSE. We open sourced it in 2017. We then worked with the Cloud Foundry Foundation, and it became an incubated project last year. And then we've been working with the community within Cloud Foundry to grow adoption. And I think this year we're hoping to graduate from being an incubated project to a full Cloud Foundry project. And it's sort of rapidly becoming the de facto UI for Cloud Foundry. So some of the high-level features, again, I'll demonstrate these. So obviously, as I said, the Cloud Application Platform and Cloud Foundry are all about applications. So we do a lot of stuff to let developers see their applications. They can deploy applications. They can SSH into them, stream logs. Another key concept in Cloud Foundry is services. So you can see the service catalog. You can create service instances from that and connect those to your applications. And we'll see some of this later on. One of the key things that Stratos does that other you can't do with the CLI, I guess, and some of the sort of vendor-specific UIs that there were, like the ones from Pivotal, is you can connect multiple Cloud Foundry clusters to Stratos. So it's not that you have one Stratos per Cloud Foundry. You can connect multiple Cloud Foundries into Stratos. And we make it easy for you to switch between those. We also provide aggregated views across those Cloud Foundries, and we'll see this in a bit. We're also not only just about SUSE's Cloud Application Platform and our distribution. We work with the Cloud Foundry API, so any kind of certified distribution of Cloud Foundry will work with Stratos. So if you've got a Stratos deployment, you can connect our Cloud Foundry, you can connect the one from Pivotal, IBM, whatever you want. And that's quite key for it being an open source project. So I won't talk through this too much. It's quite a lot of detail, but just to give you an idea, it is a web-based application. There's a front end where we use Angular. It's a back end where we use Go. We have a bunch of features in the front end. The main kind of concept I want to just pull out here that I'll kind of lead on to in a second is we have this notion of endpoints. So as I've been talking so far, that really relates to Cloud Foundry. So Cloud Foundry, a given Cloud Foundry cluster is an endpoint. Stratos allows you to register that endpoint with your Stratos deployment, and then each user can connect to that Cloud Foundry with their credentials. So they only get the view onto Cloud Foundry they're allowed to with their permissions. We store the tokens, so a user will authenticate or store the tokens in an encrypted data store. And every time the front end talks or wants to talk to Cloud Foundry, it does so through our back end, which will make sure it adds the right authentication token into the request, and it'll take care of refreshing tokens for us automatically. So the kind of key point there is we have endpoints, we have a mechanism to take care of the authentication of API requests to those endpoints. Again, I won't say too much, but one of the other key things that we've done with Stratos is to make sure that it's extensible and customizable. So we have the ability to customize, so the blue ones that let you sort of customize existing features within the Stratos UI. So you can, I'll come on to this kind of things you can do. You can change the theme, for example, change the login screen. You can also add custom components, the sort of purple ones. On the back end, you can add your own APIs. And across the board, you can add in new endpoint types and new authentication providers. And I'll show how we've used that to add in support for Kubernetes further down the line. Again, same kind of thing, and just on the front end, the kind of things you can do is you can extend some of the views. So you can put entirely new items in the nav, you can add actions to some of the existing views we have, you can extend those. So we're trying to make it easy for other people in the community to take what we've done and add new features in a way that allows them to do that without having to modify the core code base of Stratos. I'll probably skip over this, but I just want to make the point, we're trying to make that as easy as possible. So if you're an Angular developer, this will make sense. If you're not, it won't. But the key point is it's very easy to take like an Angular component with a few lines of code. You can easily turn that into an extension that will appear within the Stratos UI. Okay, so back to the SUSE Cloud Application Platform. Hopefully you know that that's a containerized version of Cloud Foundry. So that's quite different from many of the other distributions. So obviously it's deployed to Kubernetes, and we do that with Helm. But since you have Kubernetes, it kind of makes sense. That means developers can build and run applications on Cloud Foundry, but they can also run containerized workloads directly on Kubernetes. And there's good use cases for where you want to do those too. And of course, we say Kubernetes there, but actually, this is where the kind of multi-cloud aspect comes in. Customers don't just run this on, SUSE CASP, but you can run it on Azure, Amazon, GKE. So we support, with the Cloud Application Platform, all of those different Kubernetes providers that you can run not only the Cloud Application Platform, but also your own workloads. So given this, we thought, well, why not kind of extend Stratos so that we can not only manage the workloads or applications in the Cloud Application Platform, but also some of the workloads on Kubernetes. So some of the more recent work we've been doing is to looking at how we can provide a single pane of glass that lets you do that. So as I said, we sort of started with Cloud Foundry, and then what we've been doing is adding support not only for some of the Kubernetes distributions, but also we've been adding some metric support, which relates to the monitoring aspects of this talk, and more recently Helm. And again, I'll show these in a second. So the kind of things we can do with Kubernetes, we've kind of extended Stratos so you can add a Kubernetes cluster via its API endpoint to Stratos. We've got the authentication with the various providers I've mentioned, so you can connect to those with the kubeconfig file or whatever's needed. We've got a bunch of views where we really started to ask ourselves what views would an operator want to be able to work out how the Cloud Application Platform is running on that Kubernetes. You can just use some namespaces and pods. And then we start to think about how we can integrate other tools. So we're looking at things like the Kubernetes dashboard, how we can make it easy for users to access that within the context of Stratos. Prometheus or metrics. So we have a separate metrics Helm chart that's part of Stratos that you can deploy. That will deploy a Prometheus instance for you. It will wrap it with an Nginx that gives you authentication, and then it will deploy two exporters which will pull metrics from Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes, store those into Prometheus. We've extended Stratos so it has some metrics views, and what it does is it knows when a metrics endpoint is available for a particular part of the system, and then it will show extra views within Stratos. So if you've connected in metrics, you get kind of an extended experience, if you like. And again, we'll see this. And so we started off some initial views, and these are all things that we're going to extend at the time. And then more recently, like I said, we've added support for Helm. So there's an open source monocular project, which is a kind of catalog browser for Helm. We've taken that, we've integrated that into Stratos so you can add in new Helm repositories. You can kind of browse and view the charts in that Helm repository. You can review releases. You can install a Helm chart from Stratos and delete some early basic management stuff. If you're not familiar with Helm, it's really the sort of package manager for Kubernetes. So it's a way of describing a Kubernetes kind of application, if you like. And Helm talks about releases. You might think of them as kube applications. So I've actually been talking about two things, not one. So I've called everything Stratos, but actually there were two things here. Stratos is really the upstream Cloud Foundry management UI. This is very focused just on Cloud Foundry with support for metrics. It's obviously open source. It's designed to be extensible, like I've said, the GitHub URL's there. And then there's the SUSE Cloud Application Platform console. A bit of a long name, but that's what we call it to differentiate. Also open source. You can see it here. Everything's 100% open source. It builds on Stratos. It's SUSE branded. We use SLE as the base images installed by Helm. And that's where we put the extensions for Kubernetes and Helm that I'll demonstrate. Just a quick nod. I'm going to demonstrate the one on the right, which is the SUSE version, but obviously the upstream version looks different because it has a different theme. So if you do try that one out, that's why it's a little bit different. Okay, so I'll give a demo. Some sort of disclaimer here that what I'm showing you is the very latest that we've been building, that we're working into our next release. So some of the features you see here aren't in the current release, and they may alter slightly from what I showed to what makes it, but you'll get a good flavour for where we're going.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Because this is multiple providers, if I have two disparate Kubernetes versions, for example, like 112, 114, something like that, or custom extensions, how does this handle that?
So the stuff we've got at the moment is fairly, I'll call it basic in terms of what you can access. But obviously as we move forward and we start to kind of provide more around different Kubernetes resource types, we're going to be cognizant of which version of Kubernetes that particular system has from its API, and then we'll make sure we only show the relevant parts of the UI, we take into account differences in API so that we do the right thing. I don't believe we have any use case for that at the moment, but clearly going forward that will be the sort of thing that happens. And I think we haven't hit that with Helm as well, but as Helm moves to version 3 and they change things, we'll need to do a similar thing there. So to keep track of what those tools are doing and how APIs are versioning and make sure we do the right thing.
Sure.
We do have a similar thing with Cloud Foundry where at the moment it's version 2 of the API, the move being version 3, which is very different. So we're looking at how we can continue to support V2 of that API while V3 comes along and make sure we kind of offer the best experience. So if somebody connects to Cloud Foundry, that's version 2, will still work. They connect to V3 API, Cloud Foundry will also work with that. That's a good question. Okay, sit down with this piece. Right, let me full screen this. Hopefully this looks okay. Login screen, not much to say here really. We authenticate with the Cloud Foundry UAA, which is a user authentication service provided by Cloud Foundry. This is the main UI for Stratos. I've not registered any endpoint, so it's blank. I come into this endpoint view. I can add one. I can choose what kind of endpoint it is I'm going to connect. I'll start.
Can you increase the font? Make it bigger? Make it bigger?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to connect to Cloud Foundry or register with Cloud Foundry. So I can give it a name. I'm going to give it an endpoint address. I need to cheat actually before I do this. So first just going to connect to a kind of demo Cloud Foundry that I have. Okay, so yeah, I come in, I've got a Cloud Foundry. It's not connected, so it's in the system, but there's no credentials for that Cloud Foundry. So I can go ahead and I can connect, and this is where I'm going to connect with my own credentials. Okay, that's connected. That's all good. I can then go up to applications, and this is the, we call it the app wall. This is my aggregated view of applications. I've only connected one Cloud Foundry at the moment, so I'm just going to see the Cloud Foundry applications that are in that one Cloud Foundry. That's a little bit slow. Doing all right. Okay, talk about that. So these are my applications within that one Cloud Foundry. You can see what we try and do is use some visual cues in the form of colour to illustrate the status of those different applications. So the ones in green are obviously in a good state. Ones in orange, are offline, they're updating, or they're in a non-terminal state. And obviously red's not so good. I can change between card view and list view. We can generally do that across the board. Do sorting, search for an application. I can drill down into a given application and obviously get a view of that app. Across the top we see some lifecycle actions, so you can edit the app, change its name and its quotas. I can delete it, restart, and all these also have prompts. Stop it, restage it. And I get some general kind of views on the summary tab of its status, how many instances. So Cloud Foundry makes it easy for you to scale up your application. It has the concept of application instances, the uptime. And then the other concept Cloud Foundry has for organizing apps, it has a 2-level hierarchy of organization and space. So I can see the organ space that this particular application is in. I can see which build pack the application in. So this is a Go application. I can drill down to instances. So here, we saw on that summary tab there were 3 instances. I can see a bit more detail about those 3 instances. They're all running. I can see kind of some basic stats. If I wanted to, I could scale it up by 1 or down by 1 with plus minus, or I can edit it to an arbitrary number. I can also terminate an instance, and obviously Cloud Foundry. If I do that, Cloud Foundry will automatically bring another one back up for me. I can SSH in from the terminal, from the browser, hopefully. Take a second or two. Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi is slow.
Yeah.
What is this doing? Is it actually creating like V2Y? Is this a SSH session? Or
Yes, so this is an SSH session into that application instance. So if you've scaled up your application to several instances, one of those instances is sort of having problems, or is a problem with that particular
I was
instance.
just curious about the interface.
The interface, so we're using an external
Got it.
widget. There's a WebSocket between the front end and the back end
Okay.
that basically proxies from that WebSocket to the SSH endpoint of that application instance. Yeah. I'll come on to these a bit later maybe. You can look at routes. So routes are the way that you make applications available externally via URLs. This application doesn't have any. I can stream the log stream. So again, this is done in a similar fashion with WebSockets, talking to the Cloud Foundry Firehouse. This Wi-Fi is quite slow, so it's taking a while to initialize. Here's an error for some reason. Can services, so again, I don't have any services bound to this application. I'll come on to that in a second as well. Cloud Foundry lets you bind variables to applications and manage them, so we can do that through the UI as well. And then we can also look at the event stream for a given application. So every time you do something to an application, like enable or disable SSH, or in fact, as I was doing here, SSHing into that application, you get an event, so you can use that as kind of an audit stream for Cloud Foundry apps. Another thing I can do is actually deploy an app directly from Cloud Foundry, from the UI. So this is something developers might typically do through the CF or Cloud Foundry CLI, but we can do it through the UI here without the need to install the CLI. And we can also provide a kind of rich experience in terms of browsing for your code. So I only have one Cloud Foundry, so we auto select that. I can choose an org and a space where I want my app to be created. I'm going to choose a GitHub project. Should auto-complete, yeah. So I'll pick CF Quick App, which is my app that's quick to deploy. We can go out to GitHub and we'll get the Git commits for that app. So again, this is something that you wouldn't get from the CLI. I can choose a particular commit to deploy from. I'll choose the top one. I can then provide some overrides. So by default, Cloud Foundry applications can have a manifest where you can describe some of this stuff. If you wish, like I'm going to do here, you can override some of those. So I can change the name. I won't change anything else. I could change the stack. So that, again, this is where, because this is a SUSE Cloud Foundry, we have the OpenSUSE stack available. And this is when Cloud Foundry basically spins up application instances, it will use a stencil to host those. So in most Cloud Foundries, that's only the CF Linux FS2 or FS3. But because it's SUSE, we also make available the OpenSUSE stack as well. And also the SLE, this is the open source version of SCF. So we go ahead and do that. So that's going to go and deploy. And again, under the hood, we're using the same code that the CLI uses within Cloud Foundry, so exactly the same kind of workflow that's happening behind the scenes. This is happening on the back end, and I'm streaming a log to the front end. So kind of once it's started, I can, it's a little bit slow here because of the Wi-Fi, I can kind of go and carry on doing some other stuff. So that's still happening in the background. My application will appear here, but you can see it's grey. This is incomplete because in the background it's actually staging that application. So while it's doing that, of course, the other thing I can do is look at the Cloud Foundry level as well. So I can dive into my Cloud Foundry, and I've got this kind of overview summary. I can see the number of applications, some high-level metadata, applications, count of orgs, spaces, and some memory usage, and some recent applications that I've been working with. I can drive into organizations. So as I mentioned, this is the sort of structure side of Cloud Foundry. I can get some stats for each of the orgs. I can create an org. I'll do that. I can dive into an org. So if I dive into this SUSECON one, for example, I can get some stats about that organization, my role within that org, various usage. We do try and provide some CLI help at various points that's filled in with your current context. So because I'm at the org level, the org name and the endpoint will be filled out. If I was in a space, fill out the extra information. So you've got commands here. If you want to go and use a CLI, you can just cut and paste from here. I can look at the spaces. And one thing, again, we try and do is where we see quota issues, we will highlight them. So this space, for example, you can see its memory is getting close to its limit. Again, we'll try and provide visual clues, and you can dive down, and then you'll see here that there's an issue. And so again, at the org and space level, we've got various tabs that let you see all the applications in that. In this case, this space, the services, probably aren't any. Yeah, and routes and users. So very quickly on users, Cloud Foundry has the ability to assign various roles at the org and space level, so you can control which users can access those orgs and spaces. And so we have a fairly rich UI here, which I won't go into too much, that lets you manage the user roles. So here I've chosen a particular user, and I can set whether they're a manager, auditor, whether they're a developer or auditor and manager of the org and space. And that's for a single user. We have equivalent to let you do that for a bulk fashion for many users.
Isn't in the roadmap to add user creation? And
Yes, so we have, let me go back up a level to the summary. So coming up in the 1.4 release is the ability to add the user invitation. So from the UI, if that's configured, which is not on this system, you can go into an org, and an org manager can basically send invites to users to their email address to invite them into Cloud Foundry. That will create the user. They can set the roles up, so as soon as that person accepts that invite, they can log into the system and they have the assigned level of access. We will be looking at adding more of a UAA management, which is the user authentication authorization, so that you can create users, manage UAA clients. There's quite a lot of functionality with the UAA you want to better have, which is quite a big piece of work, which we've not started yet. But yeah, the core use case of being able to add users in is something we're working on.
yeah, because LDAP users then wouldn't work with the invitation, right?
Yeah, so it wouldn't. So one thing with UAA is clearly when it's managing the users, there's certain things you can do. When it's backed by an LDAP directory, then obviously you're limited in what you can do, because that needs to be typically done outside of Cloud Foundry UA in the LDAP system. So we need to, we can introspect the UAA to figure out what the backing store is and do the right thing. Okay, so it's going to be a problem if that's dropped, but okay, so that's going to cause me a problem. Okay. Switch to Cloud B. So this particular Cloud Foundry is within.
Well, that's connecting. So you made the switch from a horizontal frame to a vertical menu. The second menu.
Yeah, this particular Cloud Foundry is within the.
As I recall, the menu was on the top.
Yes, so we have. So that's something we've done more recently as well, is to reorganize the nav. Okay. So before, in the open source version, the nav was across the top, and it made it difficult to work out some of the context of some of the operations, like creating the orgs and creating spaces. So we've moved that down to the side, so that we can then put those actions more contextually against the thing there, the concept they're with.
Right.
Okay, so this is decided not to work, so I have to switch. Okay, so I've skipped a few things there. Let me, go back here. I will reveal all my endpoints. So luckily I've got some others that I had already connected but I'd hidden from you. So in the interest of kind of here's the one I created earlier, I'll just pretend I've connected all of those. And so I have Another version of Cloud Foundry. This is the latest SUSE version that's also with Irene, which is the native scheduling of the containers on Irene from Cloud Foundry. And I've also connected the Kubernetes endpoint for that as well. So this one probably now has a problem because VPN's not connected, so it can't talk to that one. But hopefully this one should be okay. Let me actually do a refresh. Might have more fundamental network issues. Maybe I should connect to SUSECON. Let me try the other Wi-Fi.
So because this is storing basically access credentials to each of those endpoints, is there a, do you just have like a lossy cryptographic hash of that? Like, what does it actually store there?
So for the Cloud Foundry, it's storing the, get an access token, a refresh token. Those are installed encrypted, and we have, encryption keys managed separately to the key data store. Yeah. Apologies for this.
Should have sacrificed something to the demo gods.
Yeah, I don't normally get problems. But if the Wi-Fi's not playing then. So actually, maybe if this is probably half connected now, so. Do I get to using back now? All right, let's do a refresh. So I think I'm back in the land of the living. Nothing to see here. Okay. So I think I went through most things. The other couple of things, we talked about users. At the Cloud Foundry level, you can get access to the fire hose, which is a kind of a massive dump of all of the sort of metrics and a stream of container information and application information. So we use this for the metrics views I'll show, but it's, you can also get access here. And we provide some read-only views for some other aspects of Cloud Foundry, like the feature flags and the build packs you have installed. So if you're familiar with Cloud Foundry, it has this notion of build packs, which are used when you kind of push your application source code, it goes through a build pack, it will actually spit out the droplet, which is then used to run the application. And you can preload those build packs into your Cloud Foundry. So we just have some basic views that let you see these. These could be augmented to do more administration, but for now they're kind of read-only views. You can look at the stacks and the security groups. Okay, so that's kind of the Cloud Foundry and the app view. I guess one thing I did here was this was the application I deployed. I wanted to quickly show that we know when the application has been deployed through the UI. So we add a new tab. So if it was GitLab, you'd go to GitLab tab again, GitHub, and then we can see some information about the particular commit you use to deploy it. So this is something you don't get if you do it from the CLI that we've enriched, so you can do it from the UI. You can see which commit you use, then you can choose to roll back to a different commit, and you can compare to a later commit. So that's quite handy.
Can you restage now, or what's that circle thing at the top right? The one.
Oh, so that shows your history. So we've added more recently, we can talk about at the end, favorites. So you can, as you go throughout the UI, you can favorite particular endpoints and orgs and applications and spaces. And we're trying to do that across all different types of endpoint. So when you come in, if there's particular applications you care about, this gives you a quick shortcut mechanism to get to those. And this is my recent activity. Okay, so that was Cloud Foundry. As I pointed out, I've connected the second one, which is the backed by Azure. And so when I have multiple views, such as Cloud Foundry, you need to choose which one you want to go into first, right? Because you're looking at particular aspects of that Cloud Foundry. So you get the selection screen. I go into one. If I'm at the application view level, then what I'm now seeing is the aggregated set of applications across all of my connected Cloud Foundries. So now that I've got two, I get a chooser up here. I can choose to filter down to a given one, or by default, I'm seeing all of my applications in all the Cloud Foundries. So if I connected more Cloud Foundries, I'd aggregate all the apps. I can search and I can sort. So you can see I'm getting some extra ones here, like I think there's 12-factor. So you can see now this is in the Azure. I can view, this one has a root associated with it, so if I go to routes, see it's got a root which I can click on and view in a separate tab. Alrighty. So the other thing we've added, that, as I said, is a key concept in Cloud Foundry, is services. So this is the kind of the service marketplace. Cloud Foundry kind of had a services API, which they've now kind of separated out into the Cloud Native Computing Foundation as the Open Service Request Broker API, which you might be familiar with. And that's making the stuff that you see here around services available both to things like Cloud Foundry and Kubernetes. Now I'm showing it here in the context of Cloud Foundry. So I've got a service catalog, a viewer here. Again, we're aggregating these services across Cloud Foundries, so you can see all of your services regardless of which Cloud Foundry they're in. Quite handily, because this is the one backed by Azure, and we've got the Azure OSRB, Open Source Request Broker, deployed. You see some of the Azure services in this catalog. So the concept in Cloud Foundry is that developers build applications, and for some of those applications, they need sort of more complex, if you like, back-end services to connect to those applications to make them work. For example, a database like MySQL or Postgres. So, a different set of users or operators manage those services, and then the application developers can connect those applications to those services. And those services might be services like we're saying here that are databases that you kind of create an instance of for a specific application. But for something like a bank, it could be kind of a core back-end banking system that that bank manages and owns, and then it makes available into Cloud Foundry so that application developers can prototype new apps very quickly, connect them to that back-end system. If they don't work or they need to change, they can tear them down, they can build another app. So multiple apps can get access to a back-end service without having to worry about how it's deployed, managed, and how they connect to it. So I'm not going to create an instance here, but you can see that I could dive into it or dive into a particular service. I can get some information about that service. There's documentation, support links, tags. There's service plans. So there's only one plan here, but each service cannot advertise plans. If there was billing involved, then those plans could be chargeable for different rates of kind of QoS, if you like, or capability. And there are no instances of this one. The next kind of concept around services is the kind of the services or service instances of themselves. And again, this aggregates across my Cloud Foundries. So there is actually a service instance that's already been created. Somebody's created a database for a particular application. So this is a MySQL instance, effectively, that's been created off the basic plan. We provide functionality to allow you to edit that service instance. You can unbind it from an application, or you can remove it altogether. We can see it's bound to one application. I can dive into that space. If I look at services, I can see that service instance, and I can see which application it's bound to. And of course, those service instances, as I said, they can be bound to multiple applications. And if I try and I can delete that. If I try and delete it, we will warn you, obviously, if you're trying to delete a service that's used by multiple applications. So that's services. I sort of cheated slightly. I was going to reveal these incrementally, but we had a few issues, so they're all kind of available now. So you can see another one that I've connected in the same way that I did the Cloud Foundry at the start. I would go here, go to metrics, give it a friendly name, provide an endpoint address. I've connected a metrics endpoint. I can click on this, and I can see that we've figured out from this Prometheus which other endpoints this metrics endpoint is providing metrics for. So we look at that metrics endpoint, we kind of introspect it and say, okay, yeah, I can see you're providing metrics for these endpoints. And so then, once we know that information within Stratos, we can augment those views. I hope that makes sense. So let me go back to applications, and let me go to my cap demo SCF. Let me pick one of the applications. So you'll see now there's an extra metrics tab. If I hadn't connected that metrics endpoint, then this would not show up. As soon as it does, we do. And this is some basic metrics about this application. We get a series for each of my instances. If you remember, I had 3. This will refresh periodically. You get CPU, memory, disk. I can choose a different time window or enter a custom time window if I'm interested in a particular time. I can also, on the instances tab, kind of another piece of information that we can get from the metrics is which Diego cell. So this, this is interesting that this sort of my demo Cloud Foundry is not using Irene, so it's running on Diego cells. So from here I can see which cell my application is running on. I only happen to have one cell, but if I have multiple, if one of my cells was having problems, I can dive in and take a look. I can click into the cell and get some basic information about its health. And again, I can see some basic metrics. There's not much to show here, because most of the metrics are around capacity for containers. And I can view which app instances. And again, this is all metadata that we get from the metrics. It's not available without the metrics being scraped. And if I go onto the Cloud Foundry itself, there's now a cells tab here, which would show me all of my cells and let me navigate to it that way. So that's metrics. Kubernetes, so again, I cheated a little here and I connected two Kubernetes, so my little dev minikube and my nice Azure. So same as I can with Cloud Foundry. Because those are now added to the system, I get the Kubernetes side nav. And because I've got more than one, I have to choose which one to dive into first. So I can dive into this one and I kind of get a summary view. So this is just showing some of the very basic kind of usage and kind of pressure alerts that Kubernetes provides from the API. So here we're just using the information from the Kube API to give us some views. And so this is some of the early work we've done. Much of this is in CAP 1.3. Some more of it is coming in future versions. So I can look at the nodes again. We'll look at the Azure one as well. There's only one node here. I can drill down. So we'll refresh and show us a bit more information. And again, because I've connected that metrics endpoint and it's providing metrics for this Kubernetes, I can get the chance to do with memory usage and CPU and disk for that Kubernetes. So again, the use case for this was around deploying the Cloud Application Platform on Kubernetes and wanting to know, are there any issues with any of the particular Cloud Foundry containerized containers that are running, right? Is my log aggregator, for example, chewing up loads of memory or CPU because there's an issue? And this stuff's all in Prometheus, so you can connect Grafana to that if you want to build your own custom dashboards and deploy Grafana as something that down the line we might try and integrate into Stratos. But we make that available so you can do your own kind of custom dashboards within Grafana if you wish. And you can see the pods, and again, with the pods, you can drill down, it's a little bit slow, and get the metrics in terms of memory, CPU, disk for an individual pod. So again, if there are issues with your SCF, you can take a look at those. We did also, as I mentioned, a little nod to kind of making it easy to jump into other tools. This is something we're experimenting with and trying to figure out what the right approach is. Obviously, through the Kube API, you can proxy onto services of particular containers. So we're able to kind of do that for you here with your token, so you don't have to remember any URLs or anything. And then we can just present you the Kube dashboard in kind of embedded. We hide the top level for interest. And we can also do shortcuts within particular aspects of that dashboard. So for example here, I can jump straight to the namespace for namespace view for that particular namespace. And we'll be doing sort of more of that. Okay, so that's Kubernetes. And then finally, the recent stuff we've been working on is with Helm. So as I mentioned, this is Helm's the package manager for Kubernetes. So if you deploy Cloud Application Platform, SUSE Cloud Application Platform, we provide Helm charts for that, for Stratos, for SCF, for the UAA, and for metrics, and that's how you deploy it. So here we've integrated Monocular, which is an open source project. I think I mentioned it's a catalog browser for Helm charts. I've added, if you go back to endpoints, I added the Helm repository for the stable charts. This is a open source GitHub kind of curated set of charts.
So all you give is just the URL?
Yeah. So I could add the Stratos one. So I should say this is my sort of cheat plugin. It's just it's an example of something I added. It uses the entire extension mechanism just to add something to the nav and to be able to call APIs. So it's very straightforward to do. So I can add a Helm repository, give it a name, Stratos, for example, right? Already taken.
Now unique.
I already had it. Oh, I already had it.
Yeah.
Didn't disconnect it. Okay, I'll skip. So that will already be there. But you can add those in, and they'll appear here as well. And you'll see they're synchronized. So what it will do is it goes out to that particular Helm repository, synchronizes the charts down so they're available locally. So if I had connected a new one, you would see it slowly synchronizing.
So when you pointed to like a Git repo, did you say that
So it's managed as a Git repo, and then it's published as a Helm repository.
Okay.
It's a fairly lightweight publish, but yeah, it's available effectively as a website with a YAML kind of index file, which shows all of the charts that are available. And they obviously have the icons and the readmes. So I can filter down by the various repositories I've added, filter by name, etc. So I can find a chart like spell Jenkins. So we get the information, the reading information from here. So we've added the ability, so this is not in the standard monocular, to actually install from that chart. So I'll just pick my demo system so I don't screw anything up for anyone. So I need to obviously give it a name. So this is standard Helm stuff where you would give it a namespace within Kubernetes. So this is something obviously we want to improve. So when you deploy a chart, you would provide some YAML values. It needs to be a bit nicer. We do the very basic at the moment, but we want to do a lot more. I'll just skip that for now. So that's going to go ahead, and it's going to use the Helm API to deploy this Helm chart into my Kubernetes cluster. It takes a second or two.
So the YAML overrides, you could like parameterize stuff in Kube API.
You can parameterize
environment variables.
So the way Helm works, it has Helm templates, and those can reference values. So you provide a values.yaml, which is your overrides for those values. So the chart will have defaults, and you can override those. For example, if you wanted to, often if you want to provide your service as either load balanced or node port cluster IP, you would do that by changing the values. The chart authorer would pick a default, and you might need to change that. You might need to change the port or the external IP you want to use. So unfortunately, at the moment, there's no standard for sort of schemas for that stuff. So something I didn't show on the services, one of our contributors, Orange, contributed a sort of JSON schema-based form for services. So some services can have JSON schemas so that when you want to create an instance of that service, you get a nice kind of description of the parameters that service requires. So we can generate a nice UI that's form-based. It would be nice to do the same with Helm charts, but there's no standard at the moment for that. But the Helm guys are considering adding JSON schema support, possibly in the next version. So again, we'd be able to do a much nicer job of, rather than having that horrible values block, right, saying, hey, how do you want your service to be advertised with a drop-down, right? Pick a port range or something. So that's something that...
So the override, is that in a YAML format?
Yeah, that's YAML.
Line.
It's YAML.
It's essentially hand typing in your values.yaml.
It is. So one thing we'd like to better do, I can show in a sec. So I deployed that Jenkins, so you can drill down into release. There's no loading indicator here. We're adding just some basic stats around showing you for that release, what state the pod's in, what state the container's in. So one's not ready, it's still coming up. Some information. When you deploy through Helm, you get release notes. So actually, let me go back and look at SCF. So that one's in a healthy state. At the end, you'll get dump out notes. You can go back in here afterwards, see what those notes are. You can go back and look at the values that we used, or we obviously blank out the passwords for you. So we could, when you deploy a chart, for example, or deploy a chart, we could opt to let you choose some of the values you've used for other charts. So particularly with SCF and certain SUSE, or with some of the SCF Cloud Application Platform charts, often you want to reuse the same set of values. So if you'd already deployed a release using a certain set of values and you want to deploy another chart, we want to make it easy to say, yeah, use the same values that I did for that kind of release over there. And then there'd be much less kind of error-prone cut and pasting the values. So you can inspect a release here. I can see the kind of the notes, the values from Helm. I can look at what pods are in this release, their status, and I can also look at the services, and it will tell me those services and those pods. Sorry, the services and the service information with the ports. I can go into release, and my Jenkins one, I could delete that if I wish. Let's see, and then lastly, obviously, this is all using Helm. You sort of mentioned the version or API versioning kind of issue at the start, so hopefully this takes a while. We can go out to each of those Kubernetes clusters and just find out which version of Helm is installed and show that here. And as API versions change and feature sets may change, we can adapt to make sure we're doing the right thing for that version. So that's pretty much it. The last thing we kind of hit on was just the favourites. So what we want to be able to do is to, you know, favourite like a Kubernetes, you know, a Cloud Foundry, Helm repository, or do that. You can go to a Cloud Foundry, right, or an application that, let's say, yeah, I really care about that one and that one. And so when I come in, those would be available to me. We obviously want to extend this, but we have some of the feedback from the community is, particularly with the Cloud Foundry, we have the org space view. You know, you kind of drill into an organ space, you find your application, and then when you come back in again, it's a few clicks to get where you were, where you really want to be able to come in, and things you care about you see first. So we want to be able to offer that, and we want to be able to do that across different endpoint types. So, you know, the Kubernetes endpoints can be favorited here. We'd like you to be able to favorite a release, you know, Helm chart, whatever, so it's easy to get back to, and then augment with this with more information about what the status of those particular things is. Okay, so I think that's pretty much it in terms of what I wanted to show. So the core of the Cloud Foundry functionality I've shown here is in the current version of the CAT release. So, you know, you can go and take it and play with it. Some of the stuff around the Helm repository I've shown here, and the Kubernetes will be coming in probably our 2.0 release, which is coming in a couple of months. Any questions?
That's great.
I hope that was useful. If that didn't make sense, I'm doing this again on Thursday at 10 o'clock in the morning. So if you think of any questions, you can come back and ask.
Thank you, Neil.